Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Green Flame, the Deep Green Resistance broadcast that brings you radical analysis, practical skills, and artistic expression from the revolutionary movement to defend the planet and rebuild just human communities. I am your host and comrade, Max Wilbert. On today's episode of The Green Flame, Jennifer Murnan interviews Hanna Bohman. Hanna is a Canadian civilian, just a normal woman who went to Syria and volunteered to battle ISIS, the Islamic State. Specifically, Hanna joined an all-female Kurdish army known as the YPJ. This military force is fighting directly against the Islamic State and specifically pushing back against their women-hating ideology. In many cases, the YPJ is liberating women who have been forced into sex slavery by the Islamic State and otherwise participating in the education of women and the liberation of women in the broader society. This conflict takes place in a very interesting context. When people think about the Islamic State, they probably think about terrorism and counterterrorism operations waged by major global powers like the United States. The reality, of course, is much more complex. This is not a simple conflict, and there are many different sides. It's not a unipolar or bipolar situation in which there are two clearly defined sides to this conflict. As you will learn a little bit about in this interview, the reality is much more complex. And in northern Syria, the YPJ is part of this very interesting, very promising experiment in a new form of society. The ideological leader of this movement, this grassroots movement emerging in northeastern Syria, which is known as Rojava, is a man named Abdullah Öcalan, who is currently in prison in Turkey, where he has been for many years. The model of society that they are working to build is called democratic confederalism. It's a type of grassroots democracy in which people, starting at the neighborhood and community level, make direct decisions about the direction of their lives and their communities and their society more broadly. This model in democratic confederalism, this experiment, is also incorporating the liberation of women, which is very fascinating, again, in a region that is extremely conservative and very religiously fundamentalist. So Hanna's experience traveling to northeastern Syria, being smuggled into the country, training to be a sniper, and basically being put on the front lines very quickly, participating in combat operations to defend this democratic experiment, this project of liberating women, is a very fascinating one. And I hope that this serves as a springboard for people to learn more about this struggle, the background, what's happening there, how folks can support what's happening there, and how we can learn from them, how we can potentially emulate some of those models in our own societies and our own communities. So let's get right to the interview.
Welcome to the Green Flame, Hanna. Hanna Bohman is a Canadian civilian who spent time volunteering in the effort to support women's rights in the Middle East, including battling ISIS and liberating women in Syria. Motivated to fight, Hanna joined an all-female Kurdish army, the YPJ, which embraces the ISIS belief that militants killed by women go to hell. These brave women soldiers fight one of the most dangerous wars on the planet. She and her comrades liberated ISIS sex slaves, many of whom joined the fight to seek revenge. As her status as a former model spread to the enemy, Hanna became a wanted target. She kept a last bullet for her suicide if capture were imminent. A film, Fear Us Women, was made about Hanna's experiences as a member of the YPJ, which included being smuggled into Syria, being an active combatant with the unit on the front line with ISIS, and training to be a sniper. The film's title comes from an Arabic and Kurmanji tattoo on Hanna's arm. Fear us women, O enemies of humanity, for you who die by our hand will burn in hell. Could you tell us how you ended up engaging in such a physical way in this struggle for women's liberation and for women's rights in the Middle East?
There wasn't just one reason. It was a bunch of different things came together at that point in my life. I was having a bit of a midlife crisis. I was unhappy with my life back home. I felt like I had achieved nothing. I was also, in a sense, mad about ISIS and what they were doing. And I was more mad at the Western governments for not doing anything to step in and stop that. But I was also interested in the documentary combat photography stuff. I'd always been interested in it. And I decided, well, I found a fight that's worth going to. I didn't want to go to the Ukrainian-Russian one at the time. It was a bit too political. But this one, the fight against ISIS, was truly, a fight of good versus evil. I'd heard about the girls of the YPJ, and I thought, here's an actual army of women who are truly fighting, not just, patronizing roles in the back, radio ops or rad ops or things like that, but actually fighting. And I was so inspired by them. I just wanted to be a part of it. It became like a physical feeling. I had to go and join them. So I made contact with them, and they were just like, yeah, sure, come on down. Pretty casual about it. And then, and then I remember when I committed to it, and I thought, okay, well, this is it. I can't back out now. I promised them. So yeah, that was October 2014.
Went over in October of 2014?
That's when that's when I committed to going.
Okay.
And then I gave myself a couple of months to get my affairs straight. And then I left February, towards the end of February, and it took about 10 days to get into Syria. I had to be smuggled across the border and things like that. So I flew into Iraq. I went to a safe house. We were there for a little while. I met a couple other Western volunteers, and then we were smuggled across the border in the middle of the night, across the Tigris River in a rubber dinghy. We hid out in the mountains for a few days, and then made our way into Syria. And I remember at that point there, just like, wow, this is an adventure. This is the kind of stuff you see in movies. And I was just so overwhelmed with all of it. It was just such an amazing thing right from the very beginning. I was like, finally doing something that's worth living for.
Mm. Did you have any training that prepared you before you went for action?
No, I knew how to use some guns. I used to live on a ranch, so I knew how to use like a rifle and stuff like that, and a shotgun. But they trained me when I went there. They originally told me it would be, I think it was supposed to be 28 days training or something like that, but it turned out it was only like 4 hours. And most of the stuff I could have learned from YouTube. So yeah, most of the learning was on the job, so to say.
What was sisterhood like within that all-female unit?
That's a good question, because I didn't grow up hanging around girls. Like, I had a couple of girlfriends and stuff, but most of my friends were guys. I was really a tomboy. So most of my friends were guys. And when I first arrived there, my first unit was a younger unit. They were right out of the academy. They hadn't really had any combat experience yet. And because of, girls just being locked in at home all the time, they hadn't really been away from home. So that for a lot of the girls, it was like summer camp for them. So there was a lot of just young girls, like, 18, 19, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who might be more socially developed, like 12, 13, 14. And it was really annoying at first, I'll be honest. But after about a month, I started to really bond with the girls and stuff like that. And I realized I had missed out on this growing up, because I'd been hanging out with the guys so much. I'd really missed all this, women bonding with each other. And I love the experience. And nowadays, I hardly have any male friends. So most of my good friends are women now, and I'm actually a lot happier about it. So it was good in that sense. It really did make me a better woman from that point of view.
Were you unusual there culturally? Were you unusual there as far as maturity?
Maturity, yes. They couldn't believe my age. They kept guessing my age, like 25, 26. And then when I would tell them I was 46, it was like their heads exploded. They couldn't believe it. I was older than a lot of their mothers. And a lot of the girls would just call me mama, So yeah, so that was unusual from their point of view, I guess. Culturally, I was actually surprised by how similar we are. I remember one day a few of us had walked to a village nearby our camp, and we just went to a little corner store in the village, and we bought some Pepsis and some bags of chips, and we were sitting out front of the corner store, and villagers were coming by and, just saying hi and how are you, where you're from, and talk about the weather and tell jokes and stuff. And I'm like, this is the same stuff I do back in Canada. This is no different. The clothes are different. The houses are different. They're made of mud and brick. But other than that, it's the same. And I was really surprised by how much the same it was. It didn't really feel like a whole lot different.
You said that you'd never hung out with women before, and that this experience changed the way that you relate to women today, now that you're back in Canada. Were you a feminist before you went to the Middle East?
I wasn't like an active protesting feminist. I grew up in a very abusive, I grew up with violence and abusive men. So I've always been on guard against that. I grew up fighting boys and stuff like that. So I've always been a bit more ready to punch it out with a guy, which is probably why I'm not very good at having romantic relationships with men, because when they start, push my buttons, I just, tell them like, get away from me, or you're going to get hurt. Anyways, so I was, I guess, kind of a feminist, but I wasn't really, I wouldn't have called myself one at that time, probably, maybe a little bit. I defended girls, but now I'm much more of a feminist. I don't go around preaching it or anything like that, but I'm much more aware of it, more hypervigilant of it now. And less violent, though. I mean, the violence I grew up with, I didn't bring into my adult life. So, yeah. So, I'm just more aware of it now. It's a different kind of feminism there than here.
That's really intriguing. The feminism and sisterhood is really different there.
Yeah. And this is where the difference in cultures are. They are, I'm trying to think, how can I say it? They are pre-religious revolution or women's revolution, sexual revolution. They're still like we were maybe 300 years ago, 400 years ago, right? So while a feminist protest here in the West, you could have what's it called, the slut walk, the slut march, where we would dress up in lingerie or whatever and walk around. It's like, it's our right to be able to do this safely. We shouldn't have to, and that would work here. That can work here, but you wouldn't dare do that over there, because you would be picked up quickly. You would probably be murdered for it, raped and murdered for it, because that's how they punish the women there. But at the same time, over there, we have an army of over 10,000 women with machine guns, grenades, and drone support and stuff like that. You couldn't have that here. We had an armed group of women here, we would be labeled a terrorist organization just like that, right? So the tactics have to change for the environment. Feminism is different from here to there. Something I've noticed here, and idea that, okay, we're going to own our sexuality, we're going to dress the way we want and all that stuff, but ultimately that's still to the benefit of men. I mean, yeah, here I am, I can wear my underwear wherever I want. Well, the men are still going to be like, yeah, you totally can, and I'm still going to get my rocks off on that. So it's kind of like, are we winning here? I don't know. I'm not sure. But over there, I will say, I spent a year in Syria, and the whole time I was there, never did I feel harassed or sexualized or degraded by the men. The men of the YPJ, or even like the ones in the Kurdish region. They were always very nice to me, very polite, and very respectful. And after being there for so long, my guards went down. And when I came back to Canada, and all of a sudden it started happening, the ingrained sexism here, I was just like, I was caught off guard for the first while. I was like, I don't remember how to fight back to this, how to combat this. We're not so terrible here, but it's so ingrained in our culture here, we're not even aware of it happening half the time, it seems. Wow. So, and even the women here are doing it.
Yes.
Right? So,
yeah, it's a patriarchal kind of sexualization, hypersexualization, and pornographication.
Yeah.
And then a different kind of patriarchy there with, property and I think, perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, but women as the mothers and in the house like you said, 300 years ago, that's your form of enslavement kind of thing. But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Out there, the girls only have one duty, and that's to have his babies and take care of his house and, things like that. So a lot of the girls who join the YPJ are running away from that. They realize that the only choice in life they have is, before the YPJ came along, was that to go and be. It didn't matter if they were educated either. Half the time they'd end up being, arranged marriage, and they were essentially domestic slaves in the house, taking care of his house, taking care of his babies, things like that. So a lot of these girls is like, well, now I have another option. Sure, it's an army and they're fighting ISIS and I might get killed, but it's still a better option than spending the rest of my life as a slave to some man, usually twice their age or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely different in that regard. The YPJ is, for most of them, the much better option anyways. A lot of the girls are running away from, like I said, the forced marriages, but a lot of the girls are also running away from just abusive households, whether it's their family or their husbands. And so a lot of the girls their families have been killed too. There's no one left. So the YPJ also acts as an orphanage for underage girls. So they send them to school and train them in self-defense and how to stand up for themselves. I've seen girls very early on in the training, in the ideological training, they call it genology, which is like the ideology of women or the science of women. They're very timid and shy. And by the time the training, 3 months later, they're outspoken, they're standing up for themselves and everything like that. And I was like, oh, this is really nice to see this. It's really impressive.
It sounds like such a rapid transformation. Is there a real different sense of sisterhood within a YPJ unit than, for example, when you think about women fighting in the Ukraine militias where women fight alongside men? Is it really different in your experience or opinion?
Well, I can't speak for the women fighting alongside men in Ukraine. I suspect, I have no idea actually, but the YPJ, we do fight alongside the men. The men are in the YPG. The difference, though, is that we don't live together. We generally don't eat together. There's what they call a tabur, which is essentially a unit, and your unit will have a percentage of men and a percentage of women. And generally, there's a little bit more men because there's usually just more men available. And we will travel together as a unit. But whenever we're in a location, we sleep in separate buildings, we eat separately. But when we fight, we're mixed in. So the person in the trench next to you could be a man or a woman. And then, when they get killed, that's the funerals are also co-ed. So, but that's it. They're not out there all completely on their own, but they are their own distinct army. And the men, part of the system there is the men are not allowed to give orders to the women, and the men are really on board with that because the men also go through training. They go through a class called Kill the Male or Kill the Man, and all it is, it just means to kill the patriarchal mindset that women are helpless and that they need men to protect them and stuff like that. So it's a joint effort on the women and the men. And it seems to be working. Like I said before, I've never felt harassed or objectified or anything from the men there. It was a nice break from our world.
That's fascinating.
Mm.
And it sounds like a pretty rapid transformation in the psychology of women too that undergo this training, and a rapid transformation in the relationship between men and women within within the same unit, as you said.
Yeah, I'm thinking though, like it can't solely be to the class. I think it's also generational. The older generations are still patriarchal. The older women are still very much, you should have his babies. What's wrong with you? You're not married yet. You're 19. You're not married yet. But the younger ones, and I think this is due to the internet, mainly, is they see other countries, they see other cultures, they see the way women are living over here, and they want that. And I think that's also a big part of it. When I first went there, the girls saw a picture of me on a motorbike in a dress. It was just a fashion photo shoot. And one of the girls was pointing to it. And she said to her friends, freedom. That's all she said, freedom. because they can't do that there, right? So they're obviously, the younger generation are they're tech savvy. They're much more aware of the world outside. And they see that just because it's the way they are does not mean the whole world's like that. I used to have a lot of the older generations kept asking me, "Where's your husband? What does your husband think?" I'm like, I don't have a husband. Even if I did, it's none of his damn business, right? But they couldn't understand that. They couldn't wrap their heads around that. But the younger generations are like, yeah, she doesn't need a husband. So the future there is definitely in the youth, for sure. And hopefully they'll get that chance to, they'll grow older and make their country that much better. I have a lot of hope for them.
It sounds like things are really, really reconfigured there in some unique ways.
Yeah.
How can we translate that to other women who are in the military?
The women in the YPJ aren't just fighting for women's rights in the Middle East. They're also fighting for a new democratic model called democratic confederalism. And the way it works is that everything is decentralized. Government is decentralized, and it's done usually on local levels. Unlike here, where we vote for somebody and somebody 1,000 miles away is making decisions for us. Over there, it's all done locally. So, and they set up committees for everything, and the committees are chaired by a man and a woman, and it's mandated that way. So no one person is ever in charge. There's always a man and a woman, and generally the men are not allowed to make decisions for the women. Actually, not even generally. It's just absolutely certain. The men are not allowed to make decisions for women, and if it's a women-only issue, men aren't allowed to say in it at all. So that's a really cool thing. To bring that model here would require us, it's possible, and maybe some cooperatives operate that way, but to bring it more politically, like more mainstream, it would be such a shift in, there'd be too many people claiming it's socialism. They use socialism like it's a bad word, but there would be so much pushback from so many people here. It would be very difficult to bring here. I think the best chance for it ever coming here is to people to see it working somewhere else. And in Rojava, which is the area of northeast Syria where the Kurds are in control of, they are practicing it there. And what we found is that even non-Kurdish people, like Arabs and the Turkmen and the Syrians and stuff like that, they would, once they learned about it, they were pretty much on board with it. So it's a good model. It empowers women because, like I said, everything is co-chaired by a man and a woman. Women have says in everything, which is something they didn't have before. And I've heard some men over there say, you can't treat women the way they used to because then the YPJ will come and arrest them and then, and they'll go to jail. So it's definitely, it's something to see. It's really impressive to see in action there. As for, it would be hard, like I said, it would be hard to instill here though, because it would require a shift even in our thinking. We're like a princess culture. Yeah, I don't know if it would work here. Not that it would take a while to work here.
When you said princess culture, it made me think that perhaps there are some things that women need to not forget, to hang on to about who we are or what we're capable of, perhaps, that can help with that cultural shift. You made a comment before we started recording that you're YPJ forever.
Mm-hmm.
What are the take-homes that you will never forget, that you will hang on to, that make you YPJ forever now?
Well, I'm quite a bit more outspoken now, but I'm not, like I said before, I'm not preachy about it. I try to live my life with the same character that the YPJ teaches. I'm much less likely to even just to wear something risky or seductive, or I don't know what the word is, but not that I have an issue with that, but I don't want men looking at me like that. Part of that could just be I'm older now and I just don't care for the attentions of men so much anymore. It's hard to say. It's kind of like I did it and now it's ingrained in me and it's going to be there forever. It's not something you can forget. So yeah, just YPJ for life. I'll always stand up for them. I'll always defend them.
Is there something in our culture that contributes to a lack of solidarity between women, or there any take homes about that, about a sense of solidarity?
Yeah, we're still, women being objectified so heavily here. As you said, what was that? Pornographied or whatever it is. Where, the women are convinced they're owning their own bodies now and everything, but yet they're still pandering to men. Men are still getting what they want out of it. The sexual revolution and everything, where women are dressing and behaving. I don't know. I'm not a good judge of this stuff. It's, to me though, I can just speak for me. It seems like when girls dress up like hoochie, good for them. They own it. They should be allowed to do that. But at the same time, they're still giving men what they want. Right? So I'm kind of torn about that. And that's where the YPJ has affected me. I couldn't dress hoochie if I wanted to. I don't even remember how to do it. So I used to dress like that. And then in hindsight, I realized, why was I doing that? I was looking for attention, or was I competing with other women for attention? Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. I find that if we're looking for attention if that really is the base reason for it, even if, we're trying to compete with each other or anything, I find that just being me, completely who I am, there are still people who like me, who are attracted to me, who like my character and stuff like that. I may not be, looking like a princess or a model anymore, but there are still people who are attracted to me. If I wanted to be in a relationship, I could still be in a relationship. I don't understand why some people just, I don't know, it's weird. It's weird. I have trouble with girls who are like that princess, useless, helpless type who need men to take care of them.
You went into conflict. You went into battle. You went into real work, and that's something that I have actually never done. So, do you have any thoughts of the roles of women in conflict, and perhaps especially in asymmetrical conflicts?
I don't think there's an issue with it. Women are capable. There's been so many times there where women were in charge, like the battle for Kobani was led by the YPJ. The battle for Raqqa was led by the YPJ. There was can't remember her name, Havel Rojda. She was in charge of the Raqqa operation. So women, what I would have to say is women are just as capable as men. We may not be as physically strong as a lot of men, which is true, but I've met men who are weaker than women. I found more times than not, the women handle the combat better than the men. Women are much more diligent to get things done, it seems. Women will follow the rules quite a bit more. But at the same time, I find that, the men were a little bit more adaptable. They were ready to change a tactic to get a result. Where the women were just like, no, we should do it this way because this is the way we've been trained. Well, there's a little bit of creativity there that sometimes the men have a little bit more of. But that could still be just residual patriarchy thinking in the women. Right? It used to frustrate me. And we're like, well, let's go do this. Let's go do that. No. Just relax and drink some tea. I'm like, I want to go train. I want to go do this other stuff. So that used to frustrate me sometimes with the women. But I don't know. As far as I can say, there's no difference between the women and men when it comes to fighting. And I am sure there's a lot of Western men volunteers who are there who will tell you the same thing. I know there's even some U.S. Marines who, when they were deployed there after 2016, I think a lot of them will tell you the same thing, that the women are just as capable as fighting as the men. So it seems Western armies, when they don't want women in combat, their excuse has been that the men would not be able to handle themselves if they saw a female comrade injured. And then, so they've used that excuse for keeping women out of combat roles. But really, that's not a woman's problem. That's the guy's problem. And the way it's been worded is, well, that's because the men can't handle it. It's not because the women can't handle it. Right? So what I found there is that even when the women are injured, the men, it was still the same. We help each other. And if it was an injured ISIS guy, they would help him too, because when you're injured and your guts are falling out, you don't care who's trying to help you. You just want to get help. Yeah, I don't really see a difference in the combat roles. And I think the YPJ is a model, an example of women fighting, and other armies in the world can look at that and say, okay, well, maybe we should open up more to women in combat roles.
Are there any women who have gone into combat that are models for you?
There's
real heroines for you.
No, I've never had any heroes.
Okay,
There's people who I like what they did,
good.
and I would like to do the same thing. But I wouldn't call them heroes. There's Dickie Chappelle. She was a combat photographer in the Vietnam War, and she did her jump course, and she would jump with the guy she was embedded with and things like that. The groups, the units she was part of, and she was killed there. And there's actually a very famous photo of her on the ground. Another photojournalist took it, and somebody had hit a landmine in her, and I think two of them, I think they were Marines, were hit. And I always liked what she did, like she was doing what I wanted to do. And there was another famous one during the Vietnam War. I can't remember what her name was. And those are the jobs, like women doing those jobs are what I wanted to do. I didn't want a normal, typical what women typically do in the West for work. I tried it, but it just didn't interest me long enough. So, and I didn't grow up with them as my heroes because I didn't even know they existed until much later in life. So, yeah.
This is a question that I hadn't thought of before we entered the interview, but I'd like to ask it anyway. What do you think the most important attributes are for a warrior, and specifically for a woman warrior?
I don't know. The best attributes. I think the best attributes for a woman warrior would apply to women who are even just not in a combat role. You don't even have to believe in yourself in a sense. You just have to not be afraid to try, and don't listen to the naysayers. And I think this advice could probably work for men too. There's going to be people out there who don't want you to do something, but they'll word it in a way that, oh, you don't need that. You don't need to do that. Why don't you do this? What they're really saying is they can't do it themselves, so they don't want you doing it. They're scared. So one of the biggest changes in my life was before I went to Syria, I had never really traveled outside of the country. I'd been to the US, which is not really traveling outside of the country. It's just, more of the same. And I had always wondered, how do people do that? You just plan, like you book a hotel, like you just go there? Like if you've never been there, how do you do that? It's just crazy to me. So I'd always been nervous about that. And then at that time in my life, like I said, I was having a midlife crisis. I was diagnosed with a heart issue. I'd had an accident on my motorbike, and all these things said, you know what, I'd had all these plans, all these ambitions, but I never did them because I was always too scared. And now the biggest fear at that time was, dying, but having died for no reason, like with nothing to show for it. So I said, screw it. I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And so I went to Syria. All my friends bugged me. They're like, couldn't you have gone to like Europe or something first for the first time you travel? But no, you just dove in the deep end. So yeah, my advice would be just don't be afraid. You might fail, but at least you tried. Where people who never try spend the rest of their lives, what could have happened? What would have happened if I had tried? But I tried. I did my best. A lot of friends were killed, but I was there. I did it. I did what I did. I'm proud of it, and I'm happy I did it. Even though I lost a lot of friends, it still stings. It hurts, but I say to people sometimes, do something they would make a movie about. And people are like, yeah, that's a good one. It's a good way to think of it.
Are any kind of individual or social practices or disciplines that you learned over there that are important for warriors?
Not really. I mean, it's hard to say. Everyone's different, right? Everybody reacts different. I've seen huge Western guys who are like all macho and stuff like that, yeah, let's get some. And then they get into, mortars start coming in and they're hiding and crying. I was told before I went, when I was talking to people, you can't go, you don't have the training, you don't have the psychological training and stuff. And I'm like, nobody knows how they're going to react until they're in it. And the only way to find out is get in it. And some people can't handle it, some people can't. I remember one night being in a bunker, and I could hear ISIS guys talking to each other across the street. They're just across the street. They could have probably thrown a grenade at me. But I just remember sitting there thinking, oh, I wonder when dinner's ready. They it just didn't bother me. And so as for attributes and things like that, it's individual. If I went up to somebody and I gave them all this training and said, this is what you're going to need to do, this is what you're going to have to do, this is how you're going to have to feel, how you think, it doesn't mean it's going to work for them, right? They have to find their own way. Some people do good and some people don't. I think in any military, suicide, well, I know it's in any military, suicide is very high. A lot of veterans, is 22 veterans kill themselves every day. Over there, people would go missing. When they go missing, we usually know what's happened to them. They've gone off someplace and killed themselves. There's no set rules for how to deal with it or what you need to do it, or I don't know. That's a weird question. That's a hard question.
Yeah, it's a hard job. It's the hardest job, one of the hardest jobs in the world. Thank you so much for all of that. We've gone through the entire interview without having you explain what YPJ actually stands for and how to say it without the acronym.
Yeah, I can do that now.
Yes, please.
Yeah, YPJ just means Yakanen Palestina Jin, and it means Women's Protection Unit.
Hannah, you'd said that the primary goal of the YPJ is to bring rights to women. How does it do that?
Well, it teaches the girls and the young girls and the young women to stand up for themselves, to rely on themselves. There's actually rules that they are not allowed to ask the men for help with fixing anything or digging a hole for the washroom or whatever. Like, they have to rely on themselves for it. They can't keep, typical gender roles of the Middle East. They have to break those roles. And but it's also with the men. The men are told too. You're like, you clean up after yourself. You do your own cooking. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, that's what the YPJ, the girls are told to. Essentially, they're just shown by example and by learning that they can stand up for themselves, that they're not helpless, that the world does not run around men, and then that they can make up their own minds and they don't need a man. So yeah, that's what they teach them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We all should practice that.
Yeah, a little bit more independence. Yeah, I think it makes a more rounded person too.
Yep, it does.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do now that you are no longer over there to support the YPJ? Do you still stay engaged in some way and support from a distance?
I do. I'm active with sharing information and stuff like that. Whenever I get asked to do an interview, stuff like that, I consult with movies and TV shows and video games and stuff like that. I always try to make sure that the YPJ is portrayed properly, not sexualized. I try to make as many people aware that the ISIS is not over. They're still there. They've just changed their uniforms and their names. Turkey supports ISIS. It's just before I went there, I thought, okay, I'm going to be fighting ISIS. And when I went there, I realized pretty shortly after arriving that the fight's with Turkey. Turkey supports ISIS. When we fought for the city of Tel Aviv, it's on the border with Turkey, and it was a funnel for Turkey to move things through. We would, whenever we would kill the ISIS fighters, we would check their bodies for ID and stuff like that, and we would find Turkish MIT, which is like their Turkish intelligence. Erdogan is an Islamist jihadist. He wants an Islamic state. He supports ISIS. And when we were beating ISIS in Syria, they would run across the border into Turkey, shave their beards, change their uniforms, and join a different group. Unfortunately, because of politics early on, I'm not sure if it's still working this way, but these so-called moderate Muslims were actually jihadists. They were marketed as moderate Muslims because the US and NATO were using them to try and overthrow Assad. In the beginning of the war, the US government and some other governments didn't care who was fighting Assad as long as they were fighting Assad. So they were supporting everyone fighting Assad, including ISIS. And they continue in places like Afrin and stuff like that to support these people who are fighting Assad. Nowadays, Afrin is a city in the northwest of Syria, and throughout virtually all of the civil war, It was the only peaceful area. And then in 2018, Turkey, with the permission of essentially the US and Russia, invaded that region with their mercenaries and their jihadists. And they do the same thing ISIS does. They cut off heads, they rape little girls, they sell them into sex slavery. When they're all worn out, they harvest their organs. Nothing's changed. The names of the groups have changed and the reporting has changed. They don't report it anymore. So it's very frustrating. In 2019, when Trump stopped supporting the Kurds there, he essentially gave permission for Erdogan to move into the other region of northeast Syria. This is stuff I'm still trying to get as many people aware of as possible. I share everything on my Facebook. My Facebook is purely war related now. It didn't start out that way, but that's what it is. I have a Twitter account and stuff like that. I try and get as much information out there as I can, but I'm fighting a media machine that is always looking for the current story, and they always want to be first, but they don't necessarily want to be accurate. So it's really difficult. Just a couple of weeks ago, some Arab stations, not Arab stations, Muslim fascist, Islamo-fascist stations were publishing their interpretation of an article of an interview from like 6 years ago, where they said that the Kurds were having sexual relationships with each other. And they were making a big deal about that. And I said, that's not what I said. It's been taken out of context. I said, sometimes people fall in love, right? But that's like any army. People fall in love, but it's not condoned because it's fraternization. So that's been happening recently. People have been messaging me asking about that. Did you really say this? Did you know? And I said, no, this is just misinformation. This is, lazy media not getting things right or making up their own stories and stuff like that. So I still fight all that stuff. I still try and get as much of the truth out there as I can. If I can find videos and photos, I'll publish those. Late 2000, am I getting my years mixed up here? Late 2015, early 2016. The southeast region of Turkey is mainly Kurdish. The Turkish army went into cities. They had just had an election, and Erdogan lost a lot of seats in these regions, and they voted over to what's called the HDP party, which is a pro-Kurdish party. Erdogan sent the military into these cities, arrested mayors, threw people in jail, and attacked a lot of these regions and leveled whole sections of cities. There's a city called Nusaybin, which was right on the border with Syria. On the Syrian side is Kamishlo, and I was literally like a mile away from this section of Nusaybin, and they absolutely leveled it because it was pro-Kurdish and they voted against Erdogan. Why is that not on the news? There was another city, I think it was called Sirte, where it was surrounded by Turkish forces in the mountains. They were shooting into the city. It's not a big, huge city. It was like maybe a large town, small city. And people were hiding in the basements of apartment buildings. The Turkish soldiers would find them in there, flood it with gasoline, and light it on fire. Then they would take the bodies out, drag them out into the streets, throw a gun down next to them, and take pictures of it. And I'd say, "Oh no, this is a terrorist. The body is scorched and charcoal, but the gun is untouched. It's in good shape." Clearly, these were all staged photos. There was one time, one of the people in one of these basements, she was able to get a phone signal out, and she called, I think it was a TV station, and she's live telling them what's happening. And in the background, you can hear the Turkish soldiers coming into the basement and just start shooting people. Where's that? Why doesn't this get on the Western media? Two reasons. One is because nobody cares anymore. But the big reason is because Turkey's a NATO ally. And if ISIS does it, or if Assad does it, or if Russia does it, it's all over the news. But if Turkey does it, nothing. In October 2019, Turkey bombed a hospital in northern Syria in a city called Sirakani. There was a Canadian girl working as a medic. She was in that hospital when they bombed it. Turkey started reporting they'd killed her. That didn't get on any media attention here. I was working with people there and with the Canadian intelligence. We were trying to figure out what really happened to her. She wasn't killed. They were in the tunnels underneath. They had built tunnels underneath. It took about 3 days before we were able to confirm she was still alive. None of that's on the news. Turkey bombed this hospital, killed lots of people. When Russia bombs a hospital, it's all over the news. When Assad bombs a hospital, it's all over the news. When Turkey bombs a hospital, nothing. And this is the stuff this is what I still fight for, to get this information out there, to get as many people aware of this as I can. But it's an uphill battle. Turkey has a very active PR group who they go after anything on the internet that makes them look bad. Trying to post stuff like this on Facebook has been a huge battle. For years, Facebook would take down anything that was critical of Turkey virtually, because in order to get access to the Turkish market, Facebook had to agree to a secret moderating center in Turkey and 5 secret sets of rules. And they were just ridiculous rules. You could not post a photo of a burning Turkish flag. You could not post anything negative about Ataturk. You could not post anything pro-PKK. Couldn't post a photo of Abdullah Öcalan, which is the ideological leader of the revolution in Kurdistan. Only person living or dead whose photo was not allowed on Facebook. You're not allowed to post a map of Kurdistan. Otherwise, Turkey would force you down to take it down. What I thought was ridiculous is that you have Turkey telling everybody in the free world who uses Facebook what they can and can't post on Facebook. Zuckerberg, on his own Facebook post, once said that no country or people can tell you what you can post. And I called him out on that, and I was kicked off Facebook for a week. So it's been an uphill battle trying to get the media on side and to start telling the truth. And mainstream media just still not doing it. It's very rarely do they get anything out there. Even when they do, it's watered down, it's inaccurate. There are media groups like Popular Front. You can trust them. They're really good. A few other ones I can't think of right now, but yeah, it's so frustrating because a lot of my friends are getting killed and they're still getting killed. And I'm helpless here because nobody listens here. And what's happening with Turkey is just going to get worse. There's still thousands of Yazidi girls missing. And unfortunately, a lot of them are dead. A few years ago, there was an Iraqi girl who had been kidnapped by ISIS. They found her in a brothel in Mexico. So that we never heard about that on the news. Yeah, it's so frustrating.
That is really, really frustrating. Let me see. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to say?
Not that I can think of right now. I'm always more interested in talking about the YPJ specifically, but I think I've pretty much said everything I can about them. I think that any interview, I always try to really get people to understand just how many to me, they're little girls. I'm 52 now, so like they're little girls to me, and they're dying, like they're getting killed, fighting for not just their lives but for an idea. When I first went there and I spent a week at the academy, I was just so overwhelmed. A couple of days there, I was just so overwhelmed with the fact that this is not right. These girls should not have to do this. They shouldn't, because if the same thing happened here, people would all be up in arms. Oh my God, they're just kids. How can they be giving them machine guns and sending them off to work? Well, we're partly responsible for that circumstance in the Middle East, right? The war there was, it started out as a civil protest, but it was motivated more, it was pushed more by Western powers to become an actual war because all they cared about was getting rid of Assad. And now you have a war where these 17-year-old girls have to take up guns and go and fight for their lives and defend themselves from jihadists. Like, where did ISIS come from? They just showed up? No, it was a well-organized army. It wasn't a militia. It was a big army. Where did they get all these brand new Toyota trucks from? Where did that happen? It's just mind-boggling how it ended up getting this far and how Western governments perpetuate this bullshit. They sit there and they say, oh, we're proponents of democracy. No, you're not. You're not at all. Not when you sit there and you fund, these kind of wars and you start these kind of wars and stuff like that. That's not democracy. If you support democracy, you have to support the Kurds in Northeast Syria. The YPJ, the YPG, the SDF. That's democracy. It's just
they're engaged in such an asymmetrical conflict too. I
used to joke at one time that you have the CIA, which supports ISIS, and you have the Pentagon, which supports the Kurds. So you essentially have a proxy war between the Pentagon and the CIA. Yeah, it's just a mess.
That is a mess.
It's kind of, sometimes I sit there and think, my life was better when I didn't know any of this stuff.
And now that you know this stuff, you won't let go and you won't stop fighting.
Yeah. One of the hard part has been trying to bring peace back to my life without getting upset over these things but I think it's our lives are designed the way they are so that we don't have time to protest. we're always on the edge of losing the lifestyle we've become accustomed to. So we don't have time to go to protest because I have to go to work. I have to pay my bills. I have to pay the mortgage. I'd love to go to this protest, but I can't. I can't get the day off work. Things like that.
And that brings me back to the beginning of this interview too, where you said that I was doing a midlife crisis and I wanted my life to have meaning. Mm-hmm. Why isn't the question, is what I'm doing, does what I do have meaning, have purpose, have intention? Does it mean something real and something honorable? I don't know how to bring peace back after you've gone into that until there is like literally peace on earth. I don't know how that happens, but it's going to be a long fight.
Yeah, I don't think there ever will be. But yeah, there will be. Once the human race dies off, then things will go back to like the earth will sit there and just sigh bigly because, oof, that was a tough experiment. Let's never do that again.
Oh my gosh. It's funny and it's not funny.
Yeah. There's truth in it, right? It's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
A billion years goes by and the earth is just fine, and then we come along and we screw it all up, make a mess of it.
Well, thank you for being in the struggle and for sharing what you did. I'm sure that there's so much more to talk about with the YPJ. If you have anything else to add, that would be great. You said that that's the one thing that you really wanted to talk about more.
Yeah, the personal aspect of it, the girls and, the ones that died and things like that. I so want their memories to live on because there's been some amazing lives that have been lost.
How can we honor them?
By supporting them, by supporting the revolution. The reasons why they died, the reasons they chose to put their lives at risk for. We have to honor that just by supporting it. So what you did was not in vain. We agree with you. That was a worthy. If you're going to die for something that's worth it, and have people who support that.
And I thank you so much, Hanna, for being here and for being in the struggle.
This is Max Wilbert, one of the hosts of the Green Flame podcast. I want to thank you for listening to our show and let you know a few ways that you can support the Green Flame. First, you can subscribe to our platform using the podcasting system of your choice. We're listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pocket Cast, and all the rest. We're even on YouTube. Leaving us a positive review or rating on these platforms helps us reach a larger audience. You can also share these shows with your friends. If you're interested in donating to support the production of the Green Flame, please visit deepgreenresistance.org. And finally, the goal of this show is to activate people. So if you really want to support this show, start organizing in your own community. Thank you again for listening.